All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Work of Now, Building Trust with Certn and JobAdder. My name is Sam McMullen, and I will be your great host today or this evening, wherever you're calling from. And I'm excited to introduce our panelists. Elle is from Certn, and Cassidy is from JobAdder. So, Elle, I'll hand it off to you first. How are you doing today?
Super good, Sam. Thanks for passing it over. So I'm Al, as Sam mentioned, I'm from the Certn side of things. A little background on me. I'm originally from Ontario, but I'm not going to dive into that because I found out earlier in the week that Cassidy and I are actually from rival towns in Ontario. So I made my way west. I've been with Certn for the last almost 4 years now in the client success department. And I spend the majority of my day managing a quickly growing talented team of individuals who work with HR professionals and recruiters, and we work to just try and make their lives a little bit better when it comes to the recruiting process.
Awesome. Cassidy, welcome. How are we?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm from the JobAdder side of things. I'm one of our, product advisors, account executives. So really what I do is kind of reevaluate the tech stacks for recruiting companies and look at kind of how they're repositioning themselves or kind of moving out of old software and then working with new recruiting companies to kind of look at how to put all the pieces together in their tech stack and hopefully include JobAdder in there. So
Amazing. Well, I'm excited. Like this conversation is definitely a hot topic in today's recruitment world of what the working out actually is and what does that actually mean and what the kind of experience means to employers and how it kind of the shift has went from employer to a candidate's market. So I'm excited to start the conversation and here we go. So I'll ask this one to Elle first. What advantages and disadvantages do you see with the growth of the remote talent pools as they expand?
Yeah, so good question to kick us off for sure. Sam, there's been huge changes the last year and a half, 2 years, and with it, yeah, we've definitely seen some positives, and there's been some negatives as well that a lot of HR managers and recruiters have had to navigate. So in terms of advantages, it's fantastic not to be limited any longer in terms of talent pool. So before, Certn, for example, based in Victoria, BC, we had to hire somebody here who could add to, come in office and work with us in person. So not being limited, now we've been able to add the top talent from Vancouver, Toronto, San Francisco, Australia, you name it, to our team. So definitely one of the number one advantages. With that, that's also allowed us to expand our diversity and inclusion here at Certn, and we're now able to learn and benefit from some of the top minds around the world. So huge advantage there. And then on top of that, extended hours of operation mixed with flexibility and work-life balance. I'm sure most people tuning into this webinar today are still in their pajamas. So a lot of benefits. But I would say the number one disadvantage, and something that I've had to navigate myself when I'm growing my team and hiring, is this idea of trust and trusting candidates through the application process. Once they're on board, training, even employees that you've had, with you forever and you used to work side by side, now you have to trust that, they're comfortable and happy and doing what they need to do from home. So one kind of jaw-dropping fact, just to start us off here, something that my verification team let me know the other day is 40% of applicants lie about education verification on their applications. So 40%, which is just mind-boggling to me. But and that's an issue in two ways. I mean, not only are you then bringing people on board who you thought had the credentials needed to do the job that they were going to do, but also who are you bringing on board that thinks it's okay to lie on an application before they've even started with the company? And in a world where it's so important to protect our company cultures, something that is just astonishing, and something that recruitment managers used to be able to probably filter out when they were having these in-person meetings and looking somebody in the eye and shaking their hand. And now they're doing, one or two quick Zoom calls and looking at a resume, and they have to try and build their gut feel and instinct off that. So that's become difficult. So I would say that's the number one challenge.
Awesome. Cassidy, what about yourself? What have you seen?
yeah, I mean, I think the advantages are fairly clear, right? It opens up to the hiring pool to have access to the top talent worldwide, and it opens up opportunities for candidates, not just from having access to more companies, but even what we've seen on our end is that each company has many more opportunities than they did this time last year. So if you look at just the same quarter from last year to this year in Canada alone, we went from the average company hosting, having open 8.5 or so roles in this quarter of last year to this year having about 40 open jobs. And then if you look at the US, it's gone from about 39 for the average company to 54. So it's a land of opportunity out there for sure. But the disadvantage is that hiring the right person is more important than ever, because there's so much more access to the roles and access to the hiring pools. The emphasis on the recruiter placing the right fit and not the quick fit is now more important than ever. And so with that, it also brings a whole new level of difficulty to hiring. So when you're hiring someone in a new country that you've never worked in before, you got to be keeping in mind things like employment laws and hiring practices, as well as how do you set up benefits in that country. So from our end, what we've seen from the really savvy recruiters is they're starting to position themselves not so much as a broker of talent or someone with the giant base of connections, but actually more of a partner and how to navigate those new challenges. So I think it is a great thing. It brings the world a little bit closer, but it does present a new world of challenges for sure.
Absolutely. I think a key takeaway here is the opportunity that we do have is just we need to really navigate how we do that and how we build that trust, like Elle was talking about, through a remote model. And if they're working from across the globe, well, how do you know what you're going to get, and how do you determine that they're the right fit for that workplace? I couldn't agree more. Cass, I'll start this one off with you. With 39% of candidates losing interest through the onboarding process, and the average time to hire as of right now is 22 days, what have been the biggest hurdles and challenges you've come across in the new landscape?
Yeah, so I think the first set of challenges that everyone faced with COVID was how to recreate the old methods of hiring in a remote world and a remote landscape. Things that used to be as easy as come in, fill out this form, go get your background check done, go get your drug check done. They're not only more inconvenient to try to schedule, but because we've seen it shift to more of a candidate market, the more inconvenient it is to place that candidate or to hire that candidate, the higher fall off that you see. And so with that higher drop off percentage, it's more important than ever that companies become more agile and more direct in terms of the hiring process. And again, it all comes back to how do I find the right person to hire, right? And just keeping in mind that at this point, candidates are often going to have multiple offers on the table. So it comes down to which companies are inspiring people, which companies are giving people hope about a new role, kind of new beginnings, especially in those low skill entry level positions. A lot of times with the temp and contract space, we've seen the increase in time to fill for those positions jump from about 12.3 days to 15.5 days this year. And it seems marginal, 3 days, until you think of it in terms of that's like a 26% increase in time to fill roles that are usually the fastest revenue generating and the most urgent to fill. So one thing that's often brought up from recruiters in that space as well that you have to keep in mind is that, all politics aside, there are more government assistance programs to help people out through this pandemic, and it does create a challenge to getting people to fill those roles. So I think those are probably the biggest hurdles, and you really see it especially in kind of those lower skilled positions or the entry level positions. How about you, Elle?
Yeah, to piggyback on what you said there, there's certainly a lot more opportunities out there, and you touched on this kind of in the first question as well, just how many opportunities there are out there for people who do want to engage in the workforce today. So with that in mind, that means there's less people for every opportunity that we do have. And with that, I think the majority of the people tuning in today are in the recruitment HR professional world. And I feel for these individuals who are recruiters who are having to kind of switch their mindset and become sales folks at the same time and having to sell this job and sell the position. And something else you said that I think is really interesting, and having to inspire these people. Because what I found from talking to other HR recruiters in the space and also people looking for a job is people are at this place right now where they want to have an impact and they want to make a difference. And so kind of a mentality that I adopted here at the start of the pandemic when trying to grow our team so quickly is the famous kind of beer example. So obvious to some, but not necessarily when you put it in the recruiting landscape. And so the example here is, if you look at those folks who used to market beer, they used to sell the beer itself. And then that expanded, they did a 180 and they sold the whole experience that came with that beer. So the libation and the friends that you can have and so forth. And we found we've had to kind of adopt that mentality here at Certn in order to bring the right people on board is, people don't necessarily just want that job. And they want what comes with the job, and what resonates people is, them being able to have an impact. So I feel for you HR recruiters on this call right now who have had to switch your mindset over to sales a little bit, and you're having to sell, the impact that these people can have within their role, the impact that they can have within their company, and then, even bigger scale, what's your company doing right now to make a difference and have a positive impact? And so that's kind of the biggest hurdle, is trying to, instead of just focusing on weeding out all the applications, it's trying to really sell the best candidates on coming on board, from what I've seen.
Great points, both of you. And to touch on that, even the conversations that I've had with recruiters, it's the classic, well, if they want to work here, they'll just go through the process. And it's such a funny conversation because, well, that's where the candidate drops off and they're just going to pick a better option, because now there's so many other options to pick from. They're not stuck in that onboarding process with a company that they're like, well, I don't know if I want to work here, but I might as well just go through the onboarding process and just stick it out. I link everything back to sports, and I link everything back to like how a team functions, and the employer kind of has to lead by example, and they need to lead by example of how they onboard and how they and when they onboard and what they're doing to present themselves, and everything that we flow. I know with Certn, it's a lot of it's word of mouth. A lot of it is how the employees talk about what they do day to day, what type of career path they have. Has it shifted throughout the company? Do they have a voice? And that word of mouth just continues to spread. And it's the classic saying, if you build it, they will come. And if you build that great culture, that great onboarding experience, you will see a lot of people start to kind of filter through, and candidates start to filter through that new experience with a modern aged tech stack company to hire those employees. Now, next question. Now you have the candidate hired with the steps. What steps have Certn and JobAdder taken to train and collaborate with the new remote employees?
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, Cassie, go for it.
Sure. So yeah, I'd say there's two ways I can look at that. The first being kind of internally what we do at JobAdder, and the second being kind of from the market trends that I've seen on the whole. The first one first, internally, it's a pretty friendly onboarding process to kind of onboard those new remote employees. We start with kind of welcome meetings to everyone on your team, and it's very informal, not really work focused. Then you also, in the week leading up to your start date, they send you kind of a fun survey of things like, if you had a song play every time you walked in a room, what song would you pick? Or if you had a late night TV show, who would you interview first?
And that really asked me, what song did you pick?
I put "Hold On, I'm Coming" by Sam and Dave, which is an absolute classic if you haven't heard it. Yeah, gets the people going. But yeah, so it kind of gets to let everyone know your personality and know you kind of away from the work you're doing as well. In my case specifically, in my first week, we had a celebration company-wide meeting. The company mailed me a bottle of champagne, which was very extravagant and quite a nice touch. I recommend it to anyone. And then, yeah, I mean, then moving on from that first week, you have visibility with senior leaders that lay out, where we're going with this and how we're going to get there. So everything from kind of that long range to even the first day, you get that video of a pump up song with everybody at the company dancing, and it just kind of sets the tone for that intro. If I look kind of more externally at the trends I'm seeing from recruiters and from HR managers, I think there really has to be a concept of, what does that journey look like for the new hire? How can I simplify this as much as possible? How can we keep from overwhelming them with 20 tools that we give them all at once? And then, that's kind of where I see a strong bond between the Certn, get your background check done, all that good stuff, JobAdder handling all your kind of onboarding. And then one of the other tools that we see come up a lot for simplifying that process is a company called StaffUp app. And it's funny how often I see the three in conjunction with each other. And StaffUp app is basically just a branded third-party application where all of your onboarding things and your like onboarding journey is laid out for that candidate in one place to make it nice and easy. So I think in addition to the fun, keep it simple and keep in mind that this is a new person that you're bringing in, and try to make it as easy and as fun as possible for them. How about you, Al?
Cassie, I think you're absolutely right. Taking some of that clunkiness out of the process is so important when, new candidates coming on board, they're already most likely, anxious, nervous, and got a lot going on. So yeah, using a tool like a JobAdder where they can kind of see the process that they're going through, they know, next thing in line is fantastic. I mean, in some things that we've adopted here at Certn, so we've started what we call a Certn camp. So first week for all employees, they go through Certn camp, run by our leadership team. Yes, all the leaders do dress up as camp counselors. And we take them through, kind of the history of the company and what they need to know to succeed here at Certn. And it's fantastic because then coming out of that first week, somebody who's been here for 1 week feels as comfortable and as confident in the company as somebody's been here for, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. So kind of gets everyone on a level playing field, even though, we are remote. On top of that, I think something that's really important to candidates today is transparency. And so we've started a program called Ask Me Anything. And we have our CEO on Fridays. He's open for a session, Ask Me Anything. Everyone on the company comes on board, and they can ask him anything and get real insights into what's happening, longer term visions, day to day, everything's fair playing field. 3 other things here we've done. We've opened up something along with Ask Me Anything called Spill the Beans, where we pick a new employee, because no doubt about it, it's been harder to get, connected with employees virtually. And so we've started Spill the Beans. Somebody from the company at random is picked each week. People from the company flood them with questions, and we get to learn a little bit more personal information about that person to build those connections. So that's Spill the Beans. And then 2 other things we've done here is we've had to get creative and shift our focus. So even in terms of holiday gifting, a couple of years ago now at Certn, or I guess last year, we gifted everyone with a virtual Oculus headset so that people could feel, connected, and they're playing table tennis together. When we were limited and couldn't be together in person, it was kind of one way to keep us connected and feel like as close as we could be with all the restrictions. And then finally, similar to some things you touched on, is just the virtual team events and challenges. There's something for everyone here at Certn, whether it's baby photo challenge or spicy noodle challenge, and just trying to build that kind of personal collaboration so people feel comfortable reaching out to people, and it seems to extend professionally as well.
That's amazing. The Oculus headsets are very dangerous, so I recommend a helmet.
Everyone was up the week after we gave them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points, both of you. I think if I'm looking at the candidate experience and I'm coming into a new company, I'm a remote worker, I'm nervous, I don't know how I'm gonna make friends, how I'm gonna meet people, do I have to reach out personally? Am I gonna be the one knowing every single person to say, hey, can we hop on a 10-minute chat? Hey, can we hop on a 10-minute chat and just get to know each other? And having that transparency, like both of you talked about, and being able to speak to the leaders, and having a readily available CEO that asks any question or answers any question that you ask, is something that really promotes that a well-nurtured and a very comfortable space to say anything you want, because it goes back to there's no stupid questions, and everyone's voice needs to be heard, whether you are in the office or you're not. And I think the transparency that both of you spoke on nailed the head on the nail there. Next question, Ella, what do you hear first? What recruiting culture is a key motivator when making new hires? In both of your experiences, how can you ensure the remote employee meets the culture needs?
Absolutely. It's so key. And it's key in person, and it's as important, if not more important, in the remote world. So what we do here at Certn is we start each interview process with a cultural interview, and we run candidates through that. And the individual who is conducting those interviews has veto power, meaning if somebody's not going to partake in our culture here, they don't move on, whether they send the next spaceship to wherever, like it doesn't matter. They've got to come with our cultural values as well. And we've kind of prioritized that. And I have to say hats off to the management team for keeping that a priority here at Certn. I know sometimes when you're growing quickly, it can be difficult. You need bodies, but when you think of the longevity of the company, it's so important to get the right people in the right place. And that doesn't mean, of course, and maybe a conversation for another time, it doesn't mean that everyone has to be the same, but it does mean, that everyone coming on board has to respect one another and care and meet our, I don't know if I can say this word on here, but Certn's #1 policy. We have a no assholes policy here at Certn. So they have to meet that criteria as well. So just continue to put culture first at the start of the process and well into people's employment as well.
Yeah,
I
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're fairly similar, to be honest. We don't quite call it quite the same thing. We may not be quite so blunt. But yeah, our first interview is always like a culture fit interview before we ever evaluate somebody's skill sets. And I have the benefit of coming from a few Fortune 500 companies in my past. I worked for Coca-Cola and I worked for Intuit. And what they had always done first was kind of that skill set evaluation. And what it ends up leading to is the least worst option getting hired. Whereas with JobAdder, one of the things I love is it doesn't matter, like you said, it doesn't matter if you're sending a spaceship to wherever, I believe is your exact wording, but yeah, it doesn't matter if you're the smartest cookie in the tin. If you're not a fit for the culture, there's no need for future interviews. And that can lead to a little bit being short-staffed in the short term, but like you said, in the long term, you're going to work with these people for years to come, right? So it's a small price to pay to make sure that you maintain that culture. And by putting culture first, when I first came to JobAdder, I think I was probably the second Canadian employee. And in the past 6 months, I've had 6 former coworkers join me at JobAdder. And the first question they all asked was, how's the culture? What's the culture like? And so, yeah, I think it's more important than even HR specialists or recruiters even realize. Like, people have had a rough couple of years now. I think everybody's ready to be in a place where they're appreciated and they enjoy coming to work every day. So I think it's big.
Great. Now, devil's advocate here, I'm going to throw a curveball into this. So if I'm a very skilled worker and I meet all the criteria and I'm looking at this situation where, okay, well, I should get this job, but you're hiring someone that's not as qualified as me, but you like them better or they're better culture fit. What are both your opinions on, I guess, a ranking scale or looking at, okay, how that importance of culture? I know you have both touched on it, but for those people that have that skill base that might not be that culture fit, like what's your opinion on getting that conversation started with that individual, or give them advice of how to become that right culture fit moving forward?
Sam, it's a good call. Oh yeah.
You go first.
Yeah, it's a good call out, and it can be hard for people to manage. And like I think Cass and I think alike on this. When you're in a pinch and you need somebody, it's you think quickly. It's let's push culture aside and get the person in the door. But I mean, I'll speak for us here at Certn. Here at Certn, we operate as a team, and if somebody is a weak link in that team, you're only as strong as your weakest link, we'll say. So if somebody's dragging us down, it drags everyone down, and it just slows you down long term. So yes, they may be more qualified, but if they're slowing down other people in the company and slowing us down as a whole, it's not getting us to where we want to go. So I would say, for us, we would have to take culture over that. I mean, ideally you find a candidate who's got it all. But when it comes to prioritization, we've got to put the team first. What do you think, Cass?
Yeah, I'm on board with you. I think the first requirement, right, or like the first qualification you need to bring is being a good team player, right? It's a lot easier to teach someone a skill set or about a product than it is to teach someone to be a team player. And I think a lot of culture fit and things along those lines, if you're a good team player and you can laugh at yourself and make sure that you're having fun when you come to work, make life a little bit more fun for everybody you work with, that would be the coaching I'd give someone that I didn't think was maybe a culture fit, is just change the mindset coming in. It's not something you really need to learn. It's just a way you need to approach the role or approach the company. And everything else can be taught pretty much if you're a good team player.
Absolutely. I think what we both touched on is anyone can learn anything. And going back from my experience of coaching hockey, I would much rather take someone that's coachable and I'll work with them and they'll get better as opposed to that person that thinks that they're above everybody, but they are the highest skilled, but they think they're above everybody. Then that becomes a weak link. Somehow they're the most skilled, but now they're a weak link, and now the team starts to separate. So you want that coachability, you want that person to come in and learn and navigate and adjust through the company and work their way up and want to be a part of something really special. Great points. Next question is, and a quick reminder to everyone in attendance, there is a question box, so please ask any questions for our panelists here today. What advice would you have for employers or recruiters as they navigate through the territory of hiring top talent in a remote world? And I'll go with you first.
Okay, yeah, so for this one, I have 4 takeaways for this one. So first one's first is it's hard right now. There's a small labor force and there's a lot of opportunities. So I suggest getting creative. I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, and it's not as easy as bringing somebody in and showing them the office and getting them excited that way. So, but maybe you have something else awesome. So for example, I know here at Certn, when we switched to a remote world, we found that our sick days were way down. So nobody was taking any sick days. People weren't feeling well, and they were still signing in online and working from home, which isn't what we want to promote here in terms of mental health and so forth. So we implemented these wellness days, which now people can take, if they're not feeling well, if it's mental or physical health, but also if they have a laundry list of errands they have to run, if they have to pick their brother-in-law up from the airport, drop their kids off at school, whatever it may be. And we've noticed people taking these days, and with it comes increased productivity because they then have the mental space to come back and work. So I suggest getting creative and promoting what you are doing in this remote world. On top of that, making the process as easy and as fast as possible for candidates. They've got a lot going on, and simplifying things is just so important right now. And also, I mean, speed in terms of they likely have other offers out there. So if you can get them through the process faster, they're going to stick with you opposed to waiting. So speed and ease of the process. I would also say it's important right now to take a look and reevaluate your screening process and what you're doing. Hopefully some of you are still playing that 40% number over in your head. So we've seen that with verifications, but we've also seen an increase in identity verifications here at Certn. So there was an issue at the start of the pandemic with people applying and then having somebody else do the work behind the scenes. So important to know, who you're, I know, Cass, it's shocking. It's just shocking. So it's important to know who you're dealing with. So I would say, start reevaluating the types of checks that you're doing, and also start doing them earlier in the process. So you have a big talent pool, you spend all this time and energy and money and resources, you narrow it down to one, and to run the background screening check at that point and realize that that's not your candidate and to have to restart. It's a painful, long process. And you also lose good candidates in the process. So I would say, run the background screens earlier, use that to whittle down your candidates. And then, from that pool, go forward with your cultural interviews and your right fit. And last but not least, I would say try and simplify everything. People have so much going on right now, whether it's kids running in the background, COVID thoughts, there's just a lot going on for people right now. So the easier that you can make it, the more streamlined you can make it, the better. because if, you know, with everyone juggling a million things right now, you throw one more ball at them, something's bound to get dropped. So just simplifying. And those would be the kind of 4 takeaways.
Yeah, I think on our end, it comes down to 2 parts, right? So the first part being before you even post a role, what you need to improve on, and then the second part being once that role is posted and the hiring process is live. When it comes to before you even post the role, right, I think it's important to realize that the territories have shifted, and you no longer have the leverage as the employer. So you need to really reconsider, right? What requirements do you really need for this position? Do you need a bachelor's or a master's degree? Do you need 5 years experience for this role? Are you just copying and pasting the same job ad that you'd used for the last 10 years? Or even worse, just copying and pasting something you found online? And at what point are you going to value drive and determination from a candidate over a degree? And honestly, will that translate to more longevity from that employee? So I think all of those need to be considered before you ever even post a role. But then once you have the role posted and you have candidates coming in, a lot of it ties right back into what I was saying, right? Transparency and efficiency in the process. You need to keep in mind that the longer your process is, that candidate's probably interviewing at a few different places. And either you need to be so good at selling the future of working at this company and what this role can do for them that they're willing to endure a longer process to find out if they even got the job with you and potentially turn down openings that they could go into right away. Or you need to make your process as fast and as agile as possible. So job ads used to be about getting people to apply. Now you have to start thinking about getting them, like it's not about the variety of selection you're getting from the ad anymore. Now it's about getting people sold on the position. So I would say be considerate of what you really need out of a candidate. Understand you no longer have the leverage, and making the hiring process as fast and as simple as possible. And to be honest with you, I've dealt with an exec recruiter who dealt with C-level and up positions, and she made a new rule with her clients at the beginning of COVID that they can have at most 2 interviews with them once she passes a short list. And she's seen her numbers skyrocket for placements, whereas before she was just losing people left and right because they were taking other positions while still in the midst of her recruiting process. So without changing anything on her end, her placements have gone way up just because she limited that process from her clients. But yeah, I'd say ultimately just understand that you're not buying anymore, you're selling. And it goes back to what Elle said earlier, right? Like, we get it. These are not people that are in traditional sales roles, but you need to understand the landscape has changed and adjust accordingly.
Now, Cassie and Elle, I'm kind of reading between the lines here of what you brought to the table here today, and I'm looking at the compensation package. And when people hear that, they're like, yeah, what is my salary? But that's not necessarily the case anymore. So my first question to both of you is what that compensation package looks like, and what wellness programs are involved. Is there a bike program involved? And what companies should be doing, or what the companies are doing to have a greater compensation package to attract and to have a leverage to sell and recruiters to sell what's so great about this company that I want to work for. So if you guys can both touch on what that compensation package looks like, and how important it is to today's world. And Elle, I'll pass off to you first.
Yeah, Sam. So I think it's a good call out because it has changed, and recruiters need to focus on, what truly resonates with people. So, I mean, I think the compensation package is a huge piece. Salary and other benefits, I know here at Certn, we've added a fitness wellness program, work from home budget, a green transportation program, and it's kind of endless, and people are looking for that. But I think there's 2 other pieces to it. One being the community that comes with it. So I know, as people are having a harder time to connect in person and they're missing that in-office experience, important to talk about how people are staying connected, remotely with your company. But then also, I think another really important piece, and kind of plugs in here a little bit separate, is the people you bring on board. And the number one position I would say so important is bringing on strong leadership. It seems to be, whether you're in office or you're working remotely, bringing on a strong leader that people can learn from and engage with and respect is so important. And once you have that key person in place, the rest seems to fall into place. But I think it's really important for people who are doing hiring to focus on, getting the right person in that leadership role, and they're going to drive, within their team, success through those other compensation benefits, the ones that HR puts together, but also through those team engagement events as well. What are your thoughts, Cass?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. In our space, a lot of times what you see is that when you start to add things to that benefits package, it gives you that chance to appeal to your ideal candidates. And if you're thinking kind of outside the box in terms of what type of people do we want to bring in, typically those programs will mean more to them than the cash equivalent if it was just added onto their base. So things like health and wellness programs, you're going to be bringing in, typically it'll appeal to people that want to be more healthy and well. When I was at Coca-Cola, they had scholarship programs for people's kids. And so you're kind of starting to think about family-oriented people. I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that companies can start to get creative with and really start to emphasize their own values. And ultimately, to a candidate, when you see that offer letter, it really tells you what the company's about when you get into those extra compensation benefits, and really kind of shows you if their money is where their mouth is when it comes to their values. So yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity.
And I can kind of tack onto that, Cass, and Sam, I think it's so important when bringing these people on board, but also so important for keeping these same people from churning. And in a world where it's hard to bring people on board, when you get somebody on board, you don't want to lose them. And guaranteed, if you don't have these benefits, you will lose your team. So important, yes, for the onboarding process, and then also long term as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point, Al. And everyone knows the cost that it takes to hire a new employee and get them up and running and get to the point of understanding what the voice is in the market and what the role is within the company. So that's a great point. First question for you guys out of the question box. I know we've touched on it a little bit already, but is there such thing as too many systems while within your tech stack? And can you elaborate on maybe the ideal amount of systems or workflow that you've seen work really, really well with your teams? And Cassie, I'll pass off to you first.
Yeah, this is kind of right in my wheelhouse. This is kind of what we spend most of our days doing at JobAdder, is not just, how does JobAdder work and showing you that piece, but how is everything going to collate from start to back in your workflow. I would say there's no set number, but you do have to be really, really cognizant of how that data is being passed through the system. One of the strong points of JobAdder is our API integration. And to be honest, that's one of the things that people love the most about using Certn with JobAdder, is that in the same time it takes me to send an email, I can send a JobAdder background check. And so I think while there isn't a set number of systems that need to happen in your tech stack, you just need to be cognizant of, re-entry. No one likes to re-enter data going from one system to the other. So as much of that as you can automate as possible is always good. And then just time and click minimalization. So, if you can cut down on the manual effort for one of your employees 10%, typically you're going to see a 20% return on productivity, because it gets them back into what they're engaged in, as opposed to just the drudgery of the manual tasks. So I think it's not really an answer in terms of how many, but I think that's where you need to focus your attention, the time and the effort that goes into those going together. And the more seamless that data pass is, like, I'd rather have 20 systems that all communicate front to back, and I only have to enter something once, than use 2 systems where I have to do everything twice.
Great point. Elle?
I mean, Cass, you're definitely the expert in this section here, but I'm glad to hear that our thinking is aligned. Similar thinking, I mean, depending on the vertical or the industry you're in, it's going to be different. But taking it's, yeah, if you have 3 systems, say, and you got to log in, log out, log in, log out, log, it's a lot more painful. And what I've seen from my own team too, with these different systems, than if you have it all in one go. And there are great platforms out there like a JobAdder that allow you to connect it all and make it easier for recruiters. So I think anywhere you can streamline. I mean, we've been focusing on the candidate experience, but also for recruiters who have a lot going on right now. Most of the recruiters I talk to are, working way overtime, trying to fill these positions. So anything that you can do to make their life easier and streamline some of those processes is just huge.
Yeah, I think automation is a big word that both of you used of how do you automate your tech stack, and how do you automate that onboarding flow. I think that the better the connection of the apps, and with the noise in the market of there's thousands of apps that do the same thing, or hundreds of apps that do the same thing. So which ones are you using, and are they connected? And if they're not, okay, how do you track that? Am I tracking it on this app, or am I tracking on this app, or do I have to do a manual process because they're not connected to get my real revenue number or real cost of sale number? So it's automation and making it seamless for the employees, for the leadership, and for the C-level execs to look over the company as a whole. Couldn't agree more. For the next one, what advice would you give recruiters who are facing continued challenges? And maybe, I guess, to reword this, like, what advice would you give a recruiter if they're kind of stuck in that rut? They're like, I'm trying stuff and it's not working, and they're consistently kind of hitting the pavement and nothing's really working on their end. What advice can you give to those recruiters? And Cassie, we'll go with you first again.
Sure, yeah. I think it's a 2-part answer. So the first part of the answer would be if you're working for someone as a recruiter. The second part being if you are running a recruiting company and you're kind of a sole proprietor. If you're working for someone, nothing speaks louder than numbers. And if you're trying to make the case of kind of the futility of your efforts, the more you can put time and money spent on what you're trying to do and the lack of results and the time and money that's costing the owner of the business, the more receptive they're going to be to at least listening to proposed solutions that you may have, or exploring for new solutions themselves. That's one of the biggest conversations that we have at JobAdder, is an owner coming to us saying, I don't know, my recruiters are saying our system's broken, I don't really know what's going on, but they hate what we're currently doing, and they say it's terrible. And then we look at, okay, how much time are you spending in your current process? If we were billing for that time, how much money could you make? Okay, so if that, 10,000, say, is what you're losing on a monthly basis, that gives us our kind of budget of how to improve from there. And then if you're a, owner of the business, I get it. It's a crazy time right now. If you're trying to do the recruiting and run a business, you need to find either good partners that you trust to consult on a full tech stack and a full process, or find some industry thought leaders, right? Join some groups, start to network with other recruiters. One of the things that we've noticed is that by nature, recruiters tend to stay away from other recruiters for fear of poaching deals or poaching employees. But to be honest, those are the ones that can, like, if you don't trust me as a JobAdder vendor, then you need to listen to another recruiter about what they do, and kind of reach out to leaders in that industry about how you can simplify your life and your workflow and your tech stack and things like that. But yeah, I think it's a really overwhelming position to be in right now. If you're the business owner and the head recruiter, you're going to need some help. So figure out somebody you trust and start to fire some questions off them.
Elle, what are your thoughts?
Definitely. I mean, no questions asked. These recruiters are in an interesting position right now. One I would say we haven't seen before, in a sense that I was reading an article earlier this week, and they were saying that 15% of the Canadian, and I'll speak to Canada because that's kind of my wheelhouse, but 15% of the Canadian workforce either are not eligible to work or don't want to work. And we've seen those who are not eligible to work, but this is the first time that we've seen people who don't want to work. So it's taking a small competitive labor force and making it even smaller. So I could certainly see how these individuals, can get in a rut right now. And what we're speaking to from a candidate perspective, I would suggest, from a recruitment perspective as well, is taking out the noise. So taking out the extra steps. Cass, to your point, if you can find a system that streamlines things for you, that's faster, that's easier, that's less clicks, less manual, you've got a lot on your plate right now in terms of trying to attract these candidates and find these candidates. And, most of you do not have the bandwidth to concern yourself with sending a million follow-up emails and this, that, and the other. And there are great systems out there who help look after that for you. So I would say that, number one is just taking out that extra noise so you can focus on the places where you're going to succeed and where you bring the most value. And then on top of that, continue learning. There are people out there who are getting creative and getting innovative. So trying to learn from some of these other companies and adopting some of those practices as well.
Great point, Sal. I know if I was a recruiter right now, my notebook would probably be pretty full from the points both of you are making today. We'll end it off with a fun one. This one's coming from me. Put your candidate hat on. What is the most important thing to the both of you? I'll maybe give you one or two things when you're looking for a company. If you need a job and you want to look at a company, what are one or two things that you really need to look for that stand out to you that, like, I want to work for this company? And I'll put you on the hot seat first.
Okay, definitely. So kind of two things now. Right now, number one, I would say that flexibility. I've quickly adapted to, working from home and being able to get my workout in midday or whatever it is. So companies that still allow for that flexibility. But with that, there's been disadvantages. So right now I work 8 hours a day. I'm in my place solo, and I'm, not having those positive interactions at work. So companies that are still promoting ways to get connected. So flexibility, and then also that connection as well. What's important to you, Cass?
Yeah, for me, like when I was looking at JobAdder, I think part of it, like as a salesperson, you always want to have a solid product that you're working with. But one of the big things to me was the opportunity factor, right? They're just coming to Canada. It's kind of solving a new puzzle of how we go to market. It's a lot of visibility with our C-suite in terms of, like, for example, I used to work at Intuit, which owns QuickBooks, and we were a very small fish in a very big pond when it came to Canada. And so one of the biggest questions I had for them kind of going through interviews and things was, how is feedback that I get from our customer base going to be relayed back to the company? And they made it very clear that that is the number one priority right now, as this is new ground for us, and we want to hear what the recruiters have to say up here, and that's going to be paramount that you feed that back to us so that we can make those changes moving forward. So I think it's an opportunity, visibility, and just impact, I guess, would be the three things to me.
Love it. And I know if I was being onboarded with JobAdder, my song would be "Dreams" by Fleetwood Mac.
I like it.
That song never gets old.
The cranberry juice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cranberry juice is stocked in the fridge at all times.
There you go. What about you, Al?
Oh my gosh.
Hot seat.
Beast of Burden?
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I thought you were gonna say "Walk the Line" by Johnny Cash.
Oh, also a good pick. A good pick.
We're all kind of in the same era. It's I thought somebody was gonna go recent, but yeah, no.
That music will never die. That music is an unbelievable era. But that's all we have for the recruiters out there today. And Cassidy and Elle, thank you so much. I can definitely see how both of you are the experts of your field from the notes that you've shared with us today. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for the attendance, and we will talk to everyone soon.